a Lamborghini for 4,300 bucks. So when people talk about cars that got away during their lives, they usually don't talk about a Veyron. But I had the unique opportunity to sort of have this in my life because of Ed Bolian. Now, we were working on this project as a sort of rebuild for my channel, and it would be a VinWiki Tavarish type build. And it ultimately didn't work out because turns out Veyrons are expensive, and when they're in a million parts, it's hard to find where everything goes. So that didn't end up happening, but I had a few other supercar-ish builds that got away, and I really, really wish that I followed up with all those leads. So the first one is one that I didn't know I needed at the time, and that was a Pagani Zonda kit car. So there is a kit car manufacturer, actually in South Florida, that used to make Pagani Zonda kit cars, and they were almost convincing. Like they were, I'd say, 8 out of 10 as far as a kit car goes. Now, I don't know how good a real Zonda is. I can only look at pictures, but based on pictures, it was almost all the way there. But the good thing about this kit car was that it actually had a Mercedes M120 V12. Now, the Mercedes M120 is actually the Pagani Zonda engine. Now, the later ones had a 7.3 AMG engine that made 1 billion horsepower. But the original Pagani Zonda C12, the base model, had a bone stock 400 horsepower M120 V12 that you'd get in a S-Class from like 1994. These cars had the M120, they had a 5 or 6 speed transaxle, and they also had a bunch of custom touches on the interior. Now, what a lot of people don't know about Pagani Zondas is that they essentially are kit cars. They are parts bin specials. You have the center console out of one car, you have the climate control out of another car. Actually, fun fact, climate control is also the same one as the Lamborghini Murcielago, which is the same one out of a Rover 45. So if you ever had a problem with your Zonda climate control, go to the Rover forums because they have answers for you. The gauge cluster is out of another car, so there's a lot of stuff that wasn't bespoke to that car. So I really didn't have any problem with getting a kit car, but the problem that I have with getting any kit car is trying to fool people into essentially thinking I have this car when I don't. That was 8,500 bucks, and I really am kicking myself that I didn't get that because imagine what kind of view count I would get when I said, I just bought a fake Pagani Zonda, here's how bad it is. And it had been sitting in a lot and just rained on because it's in Miami, it just rains all the time. Who knows how bad it is? Who knows how bad the interior wore away after all those years of sitting? Who knows if the engine ran? Who knows if the chassis was any good? But I was willing to figure that out. But by the time I got around to that Facebook Marketplace advertisement and said, hey, is this available? It was gone. So if anybody has any sort of leads on a Pagani Zonda, real or fake, I probably can't afford the real one, but hey, send me over that one anyway. Yeah, just let me know because I am now obsessed with Zondas. I've been looking up lots of information, especially about the kit cars. I'm actually more interested in the kit cars than I am the real thing, just because I want to know what happened to the company that made them. Did they get a cease and desist? Did they just make two and realize that they can't make any money? I don't know, but I want that car. But other cars that I have really lusted after over the years, especially one that keeps on getting away that I can't find anywhere, is a 2009 Aston Martin DBS. This is my dream car. Now, I do have nice cars, and I love the cars that I have, but this car is different. I think this car is the most beautiful Aston Martin ever made. I love the lines of the DB9, and then when they did the DBS, it's just more of that. They have the golden ratio, that 2/3 ratio that makes the car look amazing. It has a V12. It's the last big body Aston with a manual transmission. That car is never going to age. It's very timeless, and they're actually not that expensive. Now, a really good example you'll probably find for 100 grand. 100 grand is a lot of money. However, for that car, I think brand new, they were somewhere around $300,000. So you find these things for around $80 to $120,000, but they're few and far between and they're mostly automatics. So the ones I can afford usually are ones that have been a little bit crashed. So I've found some salvage car listings, and they actually are very, very reasonable, but I'm never in the situation where I can afford one for one reason or another. Either I just bought a car. I remember I just bought the Mercy, and then there's an Aston Martin DBS staring me in the face, and then it goes for, I think, like $35,000, and all it needs is, I think, some bumper, and that's it. Because nobody knows what these cars are. They assume, oh, it's just a DB9, and then it goes off the auction block, and it's the price of a Camry. So I did this about 3 times over the years, and it's just heartbreaking every single time, because it's always the spec I want. It's always dark gray, the Casino Royale, that sort of spec. And it's like watching your high school crush go to the prom with somebody else over and over and over. It never gets any better, and it just hurts every time. But one day, she will be my prom queen. Now, another one is a little bit weird because it's not necessarily a car that got away. It's like half a car. So I not only look for entire cars, I look for car parts. When you deal with exotic cars, it's sometimes easier to just get a parts car because that comes with wiring, that comes with transmission and engine, and a lot of little nickel and dime stuff that you never think about when you're doing builds. So when I got my Gallardo, I figured, hey, maybe I just get a Gallardo donor car and I can fix everything that I need to with just parts. And that's when I figured out that there were a few Gallardos that sold right before I started looking, and it was basically the perfect car for my rebuild, and it went for $4,300. So a Lamborghini for $4,300. Now, it did have some crash damage, actually quite a lot of crash damage, but everything that I needed was untouched. So it had an engine, a transmission, all this stuff, but it would never be put back on the road. So what I was looking for at that point on was just a Lamborghini that I could just take parts off of. So it didn't matter if it was on fire or crashed or flooded or whatever. I just needed the entire shell. So I started looking, and I found one, and I got in a bidding war over a extremely, extremely burnt Lamborghini Gallardo. And what ended up happening was I didn't think that anybody with the right mind would pay more than $1,000 for this car. I mean, it was burnt to a crisp. Now, what I did afterwards was get in quite a bidding war with the person that was just like me, except more money and less brains. So I got into a bidding war with this guy, and we went up to $4,500 for what was essentially you had to pick this thing up with a shovel. That's how you would put this into a pickup truck, because there's no car there. It was just a car that had been hit so hard, but the engine and transmission were there outside the car. And you can see sort of remnants of a wheel at one angle and a door at another angle. But it was some parts that I could maybe use even as a mock-up. And that car got away because I'm not that crazy. I ended up losing that for $5,000. But another one that it didn't rub me the wrong way, but it felt like a missed opportunity, was a 1995 Dodge Viper. And I've always been a fan of the Vipers. I love the fact that they are essentially the American Lamborghini, because they are not very well built. They are ridiculous. They're awesome to look at. They're not great to drive. If you've ever driven a Dodge Viper, they drive like big go-karts with giant rear tires and a ton of torque. It's super easy to spin them out. They don't have any sort of features like, well, the early ones, the ones that I had just a Lexan window. You couldn't roll it down or anything. You had to slide it in. It didn't even have a roof. It didn't have door handles, nothing. It's just literally a go-kart. And I actually did buy this. I bought one for $15,000. I ended up spending $2,000 on extra parts, and I was really excited to get this project moving. But then I got the offer to buy the Murcielago, and I didn't have the money to do that, so the Viper had to go. I ended up losing $2,000 on that deal because I included all the parts that I had, and I just said 15 grand takes the whole lot, and then I used that for the deposit on my Mercy. But I still get a little soft spot in my heart for those Vipers because every time I see one, they just look so ridiculous. But I know that driving it, I would just hate life every second. But one car I think I really was going to do and never ended up doing because of other projects getting in the way was a 2000 Ferrari 360 Challenge. Now, the 360 Challenge Stradale is the most sought after 360 there is. It's basically like a race car for the road, but the 360 Challenge is a race car. That's it, race car for the race track. So I had the opportunity to buy one at $20,000. And that is very cheap for a Ferrari, especially a race car. However, this one went into the wall at Mid-Ohio. So my idea was that I would take all the running gear, all the race car parts, and I would put it into a donor shell that I would get from a salvage company or something like that. Because 360 shells they're not necessarily plentiful, but they're there. Like you can get a 360 shell if you wanted to for not much money. And it did have a title. It was a salvage title, but me rebuilding it wouldn't have been a big deal. However, the reason why you can't do anything with a race car on the road is because even though they do have VIN numbers, you can't register them. They're just not in the system. So it's a weird thing if you have like a Ferrari race car. It looks exactly like a street car, but it's just like blacklisted, and it's never to be driven on the street. However, if you have a donor shell and just put all the race car parts, that's legal now. So that's how the law works. And I'm not a lawyer, so that's probably not how the law works. And unfortunately, because I had to do other projects, namely the Mercy, that took up all my time and all my money with SEMA, and I had other engagements, I just had to give this one away. So that was something that I had basically paid a deposit on. So I paid a deposit on this car, and I said, I'll take it, just give me some time and I'll have room for it and all this stuff. And then over time, I realized that this wasn't gonna happen. What ended up happening was I felt so bad that I just strung this guy along that I paid him double my deposit just for the time that he waited. And I said, listen, I'm very sorry. I'll give you another, $500. I ended up paying him $1,000 just for waiting. And then I ended up putting that on Instagram and he got it sold in a few days. I learned my lesson not to kind of bite off more than I could chew. So that's why I only have 17 projects. But I think one of the most interesting cars that I passed on, and I didn't know I needed it at the time, but it was the Lycan from Fast and Furious 7. Actually, it was the Lycan from Fast and Furious Live because I don't think that car was actually in the movie. But Ed Bolian called me one sunny day. He told me that he bought a Lycan from the movie. And this came with a few things that I really needed because he bought that with the entire drivetrain and all the electronics and all the accessories from the other Fast and Furious Murcielago. I actually didn't need that when I was rebuilding my Mercy, but I had the offer to buy that before Ed did. So I actually told him about that. And the Lycan came for free just as a good faith gift or like a early Christmas present. I don't know. But if I had bought that engine and that gear set and that drivetrain, I would have had a Lycan to do something with. Now, when Ed told me that he bought the Lycan, I think I wanted it almost immediately. Now, I don't know what I would have done with it, but as I understood it, I thought that it was a Porsche Boxster or something, and they just put a Lycan shell around it. And then doing some more research, and then when Ed sent me some more pictures, I realized that no, there was no car there. It was just a shell with some framing, and that's it. I don't even think the car could turn. There was nothing there. So I would essentially have to build a car from scratch. So I figured that was not a good project for me to do. I'm glad that it went to Casey, but it's just one of those things where it wouldn't be a car that I would make out of it, but it would probably be like an awesome race car bed or like a piece of wall art or something. I mean, theoretically, I could put a Porsche Boxster underneath. You know what? I'm gonna call Casey, and I'm gonna ask him if I can buy that car because now I need a Lycan in my life.
Shrewd negotiation starts with finding the right car, and the best way to do that is with Autotempest.com. Autotempest allows you to search nationally through all the major listing sites with one search. Autotempest, all the cars, one search.